The former slave becomes a lawyer in the North and frees her great love from slavery in the South. Imagine a black woman in 1865, dressed in a lawyer's suit, entering a Southern courtroom where she herself had been enslaved just 8 years earlier. Now she returns not to serve, but to liberate the only man she has ever loved. But what secret does she hide that could destroy everything? And why was this love forbidden even among the enslaved? This is the story of Abigail Freeman and the impossible love that defied the chains of slavery. Abigail was only 16 years old when her eyes met Josiah's for the first time in the makeshift chapel of the slave quarters. She held the battered Bible her mother had left her before being sold to another farm. Josiah, 19, was the plantation's blacksmith, his calloused hands forging iron, yet holding the scriptures with a delicacy that made her tremble. "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want," he recited from memory, for reading was forbidden to enslaved people. But his voice carried a faith that transcended chains. Abigail served in the big house as Mrs. Whitmore's maid, a position others envied but which she despised. Every night, after the master slept, she would go down to the forge where Josiah worked late. There, under the orange light of the fire, they prayed together, dreamed of freedom, and slowly fell in love. "God has a plan for us, Abby," Josiah would say, using the affectionate nickname only he could use. "I feel it in my spirit. You weren't made for these chains." But there was something Abigail couldn't tell anyone, not even Josiah. Mrs. Whitmore had discovered that Abigail could read, secretly taught by her mother, and instead of punishing her, the lady did something far more sinister. She forced Abigail to read aloud to her every night from her late lawyer husband's law books. "You have a sharp mind, girl," the woman said with a cruel smile. "Too bad you'll never be able to use it. A slave who reads is dangerous. If anyone finds out, you'll be sold to the deep South, where death arrives faster than hope." This was Abigail's prison within a prison. The knowledge she accumulated was both her light and her curse, and every word about habeas corpus, juries, and appeals that she absorbed fueled an impossible dream growing in her heart. Then came the night that changed everything. Josiah found her crying near the barn. What happened? He touched her face tenderly. "They're going to sell me, Josiah. Mr. Whitmore lost money and is going to sell half the slaves. I overheard their conversation." She held his hands. "But there's something I need to tell you before it's too late." That's when they heard the footsteps. Overseer Sullivan emerged from the shadows holding a lantern and a whip. "So this is what you do when you think no one is watching?" His smile was devilish. "You'll be delighted to hear this." Abigail and Josiah were dragged to the main house. Mr. Whitmore was drunk, but that only made things worse. "You blacksmith!" he spat at Josiah. "You think you can touch my wife's property?" "Sir, we did nothing wrong," Josiah said firmly, even knowing the danger. "We were just praying together. We are Christians, sir." The slap came swiftly. "Don't give me that nonsense about religion. You have no souls to save." It was Mrs. Whitmore who intervened, but not out of kindness. "Wait, dear." She looked at Abigail with that calculating look. "The girl has her ways, but the blacksmith, he can go." "No!" Abigail screamed before she could stop herself. "Ah, so it's true. How pathetic." The woman smiled. "Josiah will be sold tomorrow to a merchant who will take him to Mississippi. You, Abigail, will stay here. And if you try to run away or do anything foolish, I guarantee he will suffer consequences you can't even imagine. Do you understand?" That night, in the slave quarters, Abigail and Josiah had only a few minutes together, watched from afar. "Listen," Abigail whispered urgently. "I can read, Josiah. I know more than that. You made me study law. I know about the laws, about freedom, about the abolitionists in the North." Josiah's eyes widened. "Abby, this is dangerous. I'll find a way. I'll run away. I'll get to the North. I'll become free, and then I'll come back for you. I swear to God I'll come back." Tears streamed down her face. Josiah held her hands tightly. "Don't make promises that could get you killed, Abby. It is faith that moves mountains. You yourself taught me that." She rested her forehead against his. Jeremiah 29:11. "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." Our hope cannot die. At dawn, Josiah was chained and led away. Abigail watched from the window of the big house, every fiber of her being screaming as he disappeared down the dusty road. For 2 years, Abigail served in silence, but her plan fermented. She memorized every law, every loophole, every abolitionist name the lady mentioned with disdain, until in 1859 an opportunity arose. Mrs. Whitmore fell gravely ill and, on her deathbed, called Abigail. "You were always different," she said weakly. "I was cruel because I was envious. You have something I never had. Purpose." She handed her an envelope, judgment papers, and a letter for my cousin in Boston. "Go. Go before my husband finds out." Abigail fled that very night, with only the clothes on her back, her manumission papers hidden in her bosom, and her mother's Bible. The Underground Railroad, the secret network of abolitionists, became her salvation. Safe houses, hidden basements, night journeys in covered wagons. "You have courage, girl," said Harriet, a black woman who had already freed dozens of slaves. "But courage isn't enough. You need to be smarter than the slave hunters." For weeks, Abigail traveled at dawn, hid in barns, endured hunger and cold. But at each stop, in each home of white and black abolitionists who risked their lives, she saw the hand of God. "He is with me," she prayed. "He is preparing the way." In Boston, Mrs. Whitmore's cousin, Eleanor Chambers, was everything her cousin had not been: kind, committed to the abolitionist cause, and married to a lawyer. "My cousin wrote to me about you before she died," Eleanor said, embracing Abigail. "She said you had a gift. Let's find out what you're capable of." Abigail started out as a maid, but Eleanor quickly recognized her intelligence. "She reads Latin," Eleanor told her husband Thomas, "and she understands legal concepts that take students years to learn." Thomas Chambers was skeptical at first, but after testing Abigail with complex cases, he was impressed. "It's a waste. She could be a lawyer if the world were just." "Then let's make it fairer," Eleanor replied. For 5 years, Abigail studied voraciously. In the mornings, she cleaned the house. In the afternoons, she read stacks of law books in Thomas's library. At night, she attended trials and took notes. She learned about the Constitution, about the growing conflicts between North and South, about the cases of runaway slaves that reached the courts. But Josiah never left her mind. Every night she prayed, "Lord, keep him alive. Keep him strong. I will return for him." In 1864, something extraordinary happened. President Lincoln was pushing for change, and some northern states began allowing black people to practice previously prohibited professions. Thomas had a progressive judge friend who agreed to an unusual arrangement. Abigail could assist Thomas in cases, working behind the scenes. Her first case was defending a free black man unjustly accused of theft. Abigail prepared the entire defense, and Thomas presented it. Victory. The second case involved a fugitive enslaved woman whom hunters wanted to return to the South. Abigail found a technical loophole in the paperwork. Victory again. "You're not my assistant," Thomas admitted. "You're a better lawyer than I am." Then came the news that would change everything. The Civil War had ended and slavery would be abolished. But another piece of news also arrived through the abolitionist network. Josiah was still alive on the Thornfield plantation in Mississippi. But he had been accused of attempting to escape and awaited a sentence that could mean his death. Abigail knew at that moment it was time. Traveling to the South in 1865, even after abolition, was like entering enemy territory. The war had ended on paper, but the hatred persisted like fire under ashes. Abigail knew that every step could be her last. She arrived in Thornfield, Mississippi, on a gray October morning. The plantation was larger and more brutal than anything she had ever seen. Mr. Thornfield, a man who refused to accept the Confederacy's defeat, ruled as if nothing had changed. "I've come to see Josiah," Abigail said to the foreman at the gate, using her firmer voice. She was modestly dressed, but carried a leather briefcase with legal documents. "Josiah, the blacksmith who tried to escape?" The foreman spat on the ground. "He's in jail, and who are you, black woman, to come here demanding things?" "I'm his lawyer." Abigail showed her the documents Thomas had prepared. "And by the Emancipation Proclamation and the forthcoming ratification of the 13th Amendment, he is a free man who is being unlawfully detained." The foreman laughed, but there was nervousness in his eyes. The world was changing too fast. "I'll call Mr. Thornfield." When Abigail saw Josiah for the first time in 8 years, her heart nearly stopped. He was thin, scarred, but his eyes still shone with that unwavering faith. When he recognized her through the bars of the makeshift cell, tears rolled down his face silently. "Abby?" Her voice was a disbelieving whisper. "Is it really you? I thought it was a dream. I promised I'd come back." She held his hands through the bars, not caring who was watching. "And now I'm going to get you out of here legally." Mr. Thornfield was a burly man with a red face who treated Abigail with barely disguised contempt. "Do you think you can come here to my property with your papers from the north and tell me what to do?" "It's no longer your property, sir," Abigail replied calmly, though her heart was racing. "And those northern papers are the laws of the United States of America, to which Mississippi is subject, having lost the war. There is a formal charge against this black man. He tried to flee and destroyed my property in the process. There are witnesses. There will be a trial." "Then let it be," Abigail declared, surprising everyone, including Josiah. "I demand a fair trial according to the law, and I will act as your defense." The trial was set up in the city itself, a spectacle that attracted curious onlookers from all over the region. A black woman defending a former slave. It was something unprecedented, scandalous, unthinkable. The courtroom was packed. White farmers who had lost everything in the war came seeking revenge. Some freed blacks came with hope. Union soldiers were present to maintain order, as racial tensions erupted daily. Judge Morrison was an old-school Southerner, but he was also a lawman who reluctantly accepted that times had changed. "This is an unusual situation," he declared, "but the law is the law. Miss Freeman, are you aware that no black woman has ever practiced law in this court?" "I am, Your Excellency, but I am also aware that we have never been in a moment like this in history. The Constitution itself is being rewritten to recognize our humanity. I only ask for the chance to defend an innocent man." The prosecutor, James Hartwell, was shrewd and ruthless. He presented witnesses who claimed that Josiah had started a fire in the forge to facilitate his escape, causing damage to the property. But Abigail was prepared. "Mr. Campbell," she questioned the first witness, the foreman, "you said you saw my client start the fire deliberately. At what time did this occur?" "Around 10 o'clock at night." "And where were you?" "Making rounds." Abigail presented the plantation registration, which she had obtained through a court order. "This document shows that on the night in question, you were in a tavern 5 miles from here. There are receipts and witnesses. How could you have seen something that happened here?" The room murmured. The foreman turned pale. Witness after witness, Abigail dismantled the case with surgical precision. She demonstrated that the fire was accidental, caused by faulty equipment that Mr. Thornfield himself had refused to repair. She presented documents proving that Josiah was not fleeing, but trying to put out the fire, being struck by a beam and left unconscious, and then guilty when he awoke imprisoned. But the most powerful moment came when Abigail called Josiah to testify. "Mr. Josiah," she said formally, though she only wanted to embrace him. "During these 8 years apart, what kept you alive?" Josiah looked at the jury, all white men, and then at Abigail. "My faith in Jesus Christ, and the hope that God had a plan greater than my chains. I prayed every day for the woman I loved, asking God to protect her and use her for His glory. When I saw her walk in here, I understood that God answers prayers in ways we cannot imagine." There were tears in some of the audience's eyes. Abigail made her closing argument, citing not only laws, but appealing to conscience. "Gentlemen of the jury, you have before you a choice that defines not only this man's fate, but the kind of future we will build. We can cling to the injustices of the past, or we can take the first step toward a South where the law protects everyone equally." The jury deliberated for 3 hours, an eternity for Abigail and Josiah. When they returned, the silence in the courtroom was sepulchral. "In the case of State versus Josiah Freeman," the jury spokesman announced, "we, the jury, find the defendant not guilty." The room erupted in cheers. Some celebrated, some were outraged, but Abigail only had eyes for Josiah, who was finally free. Truly free. Outside the courthouse, under the late afternoon sun, they embraced for the first time as free people. "You did it," Josiah said, his voice choked with emotion. "You really came back." "God did this," Abigail corrected. "He kept us alive, gave us strength, and transformed pain into purpose. All those nights you prayed with me in the forge, all that suffering, God was preparing us for this moment." Mr. Thornfield watched them from afar, defeated. His world had ended, but a new one was being born. Josiah knelt right there in the dust of the street. "Abigail Freeman, you are the bravest woman I know. You are my hero, my inspiration, my answer to prayer. Will you marry me and let's build a life together in freedom?" With tears in her eyes, Abigail replied, "Yes, 1,000 times yes." They were married a week later in a small Baptist church for black people, with Eleanor and Thomas coming from Boston as witnesses. The pastor, a former slave who had learned to read the Bible in freedom, spoke about how God transforms tragedies into triumphs. Abigail and Josiah returned to the North, where she became one of the first officially recognized black female lawyers, dedicating her career to defending former slaves and fighting for civil rights. Josiah opened a blacksmith shop that became prosperous, but his greatest pride was supporting his wife's work. Years later, they returned to the South to open a law office in Charleston, offering free services to freed slaves. They had 4 children, all educated, all taught that faith and justice go hand in hand. On the office wall, Abigail kept her mother's battered Bible framed, open to Jeremiah 29:11. And whenever a case seemed impossible, she would touch those yellowed pages and remember where she came from, what she had survived, and how an impossible love had become a testament to the fact that God can redeem even the most painful stories. "Never underestimate," she would tell the young lawyers who came to learn from her, "the power of a person with faith, purpose, and courage. Chains may bind the body, but they can never bind the soul of one who knows their worth in Christ." The story of Abigail and Josiah has become legend, not as a fairy tale, but as a testament to the fact that true love, sustained by unwavering faith and unexpected courage, can overcome even the most cruel systems of oppression. And on quiet nights, when they were alone in their free home, Josiah would hold Abigail's hand and recite, as he had done decades before in the forge, "The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want." And Abigail replied with a smile, "He guided us through the valley of the shadow of death and brought us home." This was the extraordinary story of Abigail Freeman, the former slave who became a lawyer and freed her great love through faith, courage, and justice. A journey of pain transformed into purpose, of chains transformed into wings. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel for more inspiring stories of faith, courage, and love that defy the impossible. Leave a comment telling us which part moved you the most, and share this message with someone who needs to believe that hope never dies, even in the darkest hours. God bless you, and may the story of Abigail and Josiah remind us that we are capable of far more than we imagine when we have faith, love, and a purpose greater than ourselves.